Welcome to Planting Pinellas, the podcast that digs deep into the heart of gardening in Pinellas County. Presented by Master Gardener volunteers of the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. I'm Charlotte Vaughn.
I'm Alan Shapiro. Whether you're a local looking to connect with your community or a visitor curious about your area's culture, conservation, and all things green, this is the place for you.
Join us as we explore the people, places, projects, and of course plants that make Pinellas a thriving hub of sustainability, innovation, and natural beauty. From gardening tips to environmental initiatives, we've got the roots of Pinellas covered. So grab your gardening gloves and let's get started. Well, hello and welcome back to the Planting Pinellas podcast. Today we are all about trees, and this is Earth Month. It is Arbor Day. It is just a wonderful month here in April in Florida.
Green Thumb Festival coming.
Green Thumb Festival is coming up, and that's towards the end of the month. We'll talk about that more later. But first of all, we have a guest in the studio today, and that is Carolyn Cheatham Rhodes. She is an urban forester with the Public Works Department, Urban Forestry, and Landscape Services in Pinellas County. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so your job is all about trees, and that's exactly why we're so excited to have you here today. And just kind of talking a little bit about who you are and your background, but then the department in general, kind of what this means to Pinellas County residents and how this benefits all of us and how we all should be involved with this.
That's a lot right there. Yeah, I work for Pinellas County Public Works in the Urban Forestry and Landscape Services section. So our team maintains the public right-of-ways, those spaces, the green portions of those public right-of-ways, right? So we take care of the trees, we manage the grasses and the like. We have a whole team that mows, as well as we have contractual folks that mow. And then we have several crews, 4 crews that do our tree pruning and removals when necessary. And then we have contractual staff that do tree planting for us. So when we remove trees, that we can replant trees in our rights of way, and or that if we have capital tree removal. So if the county does a capital project and they have to remove trees along a roadway as part of that project, that we mitigate for those trees and we plant them again, hopefully in that same community, but sometimes maybe within the same watershed. So that's kind of what Public Works Urban Forestry does. We maintain those trees in the rights of way, and we also maintain an inventory of them as well. So we consider them capital assets, and so we actually make sure that we know where all of them are. We document all of their demographic information so that we can make better management decisions for them.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what does that actually mean, a capital asset and demographics? I mean, this sounds foreign to the world of trees. How does that work?
I was thinking the same thing. It was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. So how do you catalog them and know what's there?
There you go. I've gone down a rabbit hole, right?
That's okay. We go down many rabbit holes on this show.
Well, when we talk about them being capital assets, is that we're basically saying that this has that these living organisms are valuable elements, structural elements of our community, right? So just like maybe a street sign, a pipe, a sidewalk, something else, we attach a value to these trees. And we want to do something like inventory them so that we have them available to be able to do work on them. We know where they are, what their condition is, we know who they are. So that's those demographics. I know it's a live oak. I know it's a 24-inch live oak, right? I know it has a 60-foot diameter canopy. And then when I need to go do work on that tree, and I know its condition, it's in good condition right now, and that I know when I need to maybe go do some elevation, I need to raise that tree up over the roadway so that it doesn't impact vehicles. I have that information. I know what I'm going to go see.
And you're talking about raising the canopy, not the root.
Yes, raising a canopy. Right, so we deal with that in urban forestry all the time. Even though trees are an asset in themselves, they intersect with our other assets, right? Our other public assets, our roadways, our curbs, our sidewalks. And that is a continual challenge for urban foresters throughout the country. Is as trees mature, sometimes they come into conflict with those others. So we're always kind of trying to balance that. The key goal always is public safety, right? We want safe sidewalks, we want safe roadways, and we want safe trees, right? We want structurally sound trees that have been well taken care of.
Well, and I think some people are of the mindset that in our hurricane-prone region, that trees are more of a liability than an asset. But I feel like that in our sunny conditions, they provide so much ecological value, and even just the shade and the mitigation of heat. If you're talking about planting them on a roadway, that those roadways often will trap and radiate heat well into the evening hours. But if they can block some of that with a tree, then we're reducing that impact of those heat areas and heat islands, I've heard them called.
Most definitely. We're always talking about the ecosystem benefits associated with trees, and shading and cooling is one of those key things. But then you touch on something else. A lot of times we think about trees as a liability, or we're concerned about trees during hurricanes. But at the same time, trees and tree canopies mitigate wind across the landscape. So in some instances, they're actually going to protect our homes, right? And well-maintained trees also are sturdy and can withstand our storms, right? And we've had lots of research from the University of Florida that's told us about those trees that can withstand even some of the most intense storms that our state has endured.
Yeah.
Can I go back for a minute on terms of this catalog that you keep and this inventory you keep? I mean, we're a pretty large county, and I know, and we have 24 municipalities also in our county, which is also kind of unique for our small county. So I guess the two questions. The first one is that how do you keep this inventory, and who keeps it, and who maintains this? And I assume it's some kind of database that you're doing, and who kind of oversees that? And then the second thing is that with all the municipalities, because there's a lot of unincorporated areas, but there's a lot of incorporated areas in our county, how do you work with the other municipalities as the county in urban forestry? How do you work with them?
Great questions, because the urban forest is a continuum. It doesn't stop at our boundary.
Right. I mean, it's not a border. Our borders. Right.
It kind of keeps going.
Yeah.
Nature doesn't understand city limits.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have a spatial geodatabase inventory, and so that's kept in an ESRI or database. It's a GIS database, a Geographic Information System database. And we use tablets in the field to collect that data. So we can actually kind of like literally just physically put a point when we're standing under the canopy. It locates us fairly close within meters of the tree, and then we can put a point, say, in the center of the canopy. And then the application allows us to enter all that demographic information about the tree. So the DBH, which is the diameter at breast height.
We want to talk about that, but let's come back to it.
We'll come back to that.
Diameter at breast height, we do the canopy diameter, right? Yeah. So a lot of that stuff gives us information about those ecosystem benefits, right?
Is that in real time?
Yes, it's in real time.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we've got that available, and we can see a map of where all of our tree features are across the county.
So are you physically out there with tape measures, or using drones, or a combination? How does that work?
Yeah, lots of different ways. So, I mean, we can do canopy assessments from aerial imagery and machine learning and things like that. But it's very important to actually touch those trees on the ground, because I can't get condition information from remote sensing, right? And I can't get really accurate information about individual trees, sometimes because the canopy looks like it's uniform in an aerial, right? But if I'm down underneath, I can kind of determine where a tree is, where the canopy starts and stops.
And the understory is sometimes not visible from those aerials.
Right. But having that condition is one of the key things that we do. So we collect inventory like that, and then we can understand the demographics. I can understand how old or young my population is, kind of based on that diameter of the tree. Do I have mostly mature trees, 24 inches or larger, or is the majority of our tree canopy made up of trees that are smaller than that? What's the condition overall of our urban forest? And, then also we can run a lot of that information through models. And like the iTree models that are available from the Forest Service, and to be able to say something like, how much stormwater interception that tree canopy that we estimate is doing for us in our community. And I think you had another question, and I'm sorry.
About the municipality.
About the municipalities. Yeah, and how we might work with those folks as well.
Yeah.
So we have our own inventory. A number of those have inventories as well. We had talked before about whether we communicate across, and we have a kind of an informal group of city arborists and urban
Okay.
foresters
That's
throughout
great.
the 24 municipalities. And we even include some folks from the greater Bay Area region. And we come in and we talk about best management practices and pain points and the challenges of managing the urban forest, because we all understand that it's a continuum as well. And any way that we can kind of unify our approach but still by keeping bespoke to our unique communities and our unique circumstances, we try to do that too.
Now, I know I've seen some signs around the Central County, Largo in particular, about being a tree city. Is that something that is specific to Largo, or does it impact other municipalities or the county at large? What's the scope of that?
Oh, that's a great question. I haven't taken a look at the website lately to see how many of our communities in Pinellas County are tree cities, but the county itself is also one of the few counties in the nation that is a Tree City USA.
That's awesome.
And we are actually the only county in the United States that is part of the Tree Cities of the World designation
Wow.
as well. And we've only done that for a short time. I think we're on about 8 years of that designation.
So what does that mean? How do you get designated as a tree city
Exactly. So it's
or
recognition.
county?
Right. It's recognition for your management. So it's that you acknowledge that taking care of trees and planting trees is important in your community, that you do things like keep that inventory, that you hold celebrations like our tree giveaway that's coming up on the 18th, that you have a management and that your community is vested in trees.
Well, let's sidetrack just for a second about the tree giveaway. I think I've seen some stuff online about that, and I am definitely going to put those links into our show notes for this month. But where is that, and what can the average person expect? Because this is for homeowners. Would it apply to somebody that maybe has a small lot versus a large lot? Who would this benefit?
Yeah, definitely. There should be some good information online as well, and you guys can put that link on there. But this is a drive-through event, so it's loads of fun. And we ask people not to get there too early, but, make sure that you're arriving on time, and then to always be patient and kind of enjoy the process. Take a look at the person in front of you and behind you in this long line of cars and go, all these people love trees and they want to plant trees. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. But so what we do is we have about 500 trees to give away. We offer up to 2 trees per household. We advertise this is something for unincorporated Pinellas County, but you don't have to show ID
Okay,
and show where you're
so
from.
if you're from Largo or from Seminole or from one of the
Exactly.
municipalities, you can
You
still.
can still participate. We just
Okay.
simply ask folks to affirm that they're a resident of Pinellas County. So we are on the honor system, and then we can get you a couple of trees. We have mostly, I think, larger growing tree species available this year. We tend to focus on natives, and we tend to try to want to focus on, shade canopy trees. I think we have bald cypress, live oak, longleaf pines, South Florida slash pines, and sweet bay magnolias. And then our one more mid-sized tree or smaller tree for a smaller lot would be like a Dahoon holly.
Okay, and those are awesome. Those are native as well, right?
They are as well.
Yeah, that's an awesome tree. And I personally just love the look of the longleaf pine, but they do get pretty big. So I know in my neighborhood, our lots are not huge, but they're not as small as maybe in the St. Pete city limits, but several of my neighbors have them. And yeah, they're tall, but they're growing and they're healthy. So I think that some people may be afraid to plant a medium or large tree on their home property, but how much would you say that they need to space that away from a building or a fence for it to be appropriate?
That's a great question, because there are some good guidelines that are available from the University of Florida, the IFAS extension, EDIS documents and the like. And I think often they will recommend, minimums of 20 to 30 feet for large maturing shade trees.
Okay.
I think you can get a little closer in some circumstances, particularly with trees that are going to be very, very tall and narrow, like pines or bald cypress. But you want to factor at least probably 10 feet away from any home, right? Because we
Okay.
talk about some of the more recent research by Dr. Deb Hilbert, says that those larger mature trees, we want to be a minimum of 8 feet from any infrastructure, right?
Okay.
For those to be able to develop, get a really nice stem and have a nice root plate that's not going to conflict with any of our hard surfaces.
Yeah, because definitely the right plant in the right place is one of our slogans.
Patience is also one of our slogans
Of
too.
course.
The trees that you are providing, I think, are what, are 3-gallon
Yes.
pots? So they're probably maybe 5, 6, 7 feet at the most.
Yes.
Some of them are going to get to be very large. And I just want to go back for a second in researching for this episode. Charlotte, you provided a link to me to, I think it was really good, and I think we should put it in the show notes in terms of what you should do if there's a tree giveaway, because I think some people just come and take the tree and don't think about it and maybe leave it in the pot for a long time. So there's it was really interesting. So before the event, you should inventory your yard. That's one of the things. Look at the yard size, soil types, right? What sun, how much sun does something get? All of those things are important. Then during the giveaway, I'm going to ask you this: are there details that you are providing to the person that takes up the tree so they know how to plant it properly to make sure it will grow and thrive?
Yes, we do. Definitely. Those are all really important things. We need to use those before we make our way to the tree giveaway. We need to evaluate our site and make sure that it's appropriate for the species that have been provided. We've got some good links, I think, on our, we've had some posts on our social media that told us more about those trees so that we could know whether it was a larger or smaller tree, what kind of conditions it preferred, so that we could evaluate our yard ahead of time. And then when we get there, we'll give a handout that shows that kind of classic planting hole diagram and tells you how to do that and do that. We also have, I think on our site and others, and you guys might have too, there's a great link to a video that was created by Lara Milligan and Alyssa Vinson, and it shows how to plant a tree that typically is given away at a giveaway. Loads of fun video and full of great information to help you get your tree in the ground in the right spot.
Well, yeah, I think that one came from the Florida Arbor Day giveaway in January, because our Arbor Day is sooner. And this kind of brings out a thought in my mind. So right now in our county, we're in a really serious drought. So as far as planting a tree or planting anything really, what do we need to think about in that? And I have some thoughts on that myself, but how do we make sure that that tree is going to be successful when we're under watering restrictions?
Right, that's a really good question, and we need to all be very mindful of that and not waste anything. But hand watering is typically exempt from some of those restrictions. But then we also just want to be mindful of how we're doing it, right? We don't want to water to excess. So again, there's some really good guidelines available from the University of Florida based on the size of the tree and how much water you should use every time. My protocol that I typically use with small trees is I'm watering them every day for that first week. But this is a little tree. You're only going to need to get a couple of gallons on that tree in the morning hours before the start of the day, and do that every day for that first week. And then we reduce those down to probably about 3 times a week for that next month going forward. So that we're judicious with our water. We put the right amount of water on at the right time of day, right? And we're not using like irrigation systems or something like that. We're using targeted hand watering.
Right.
If you happen to have had, a rain barrel or something like that, and you've been collecting some rainwater, that's fantastic. The only thing I ever advise caution on is, say, particularly with pine trees, is if we have reclaimed water. Because sometimes those reclaimed waters can have some salts in them, and those little pine trees don't like it that much. So that I just always tell folks to be mindful of that.
Yeah, so especially if you do use reclaimed water in your landscape, maybe make sure that you've got that irrigation turned off while that tree is getting established, or shut off a head that's too close to it. Might be a good idea, which, we want the irrigation system off anyway. Let the grass be dormant while we're trying to conserve.
Exactly.
That's a little personal there.
Right. And of course, always, go check with the county and make sure, and or your municipality, which may have, more restrictive water restrictions going in, to make sure that you're doing that. But we always want to make sure that it's a targeted watering on that tree and not using an irrigation system that's watering the lawn too.
So those are some really good things about after the giveaway to do, certainly. And I think one of the things, and I'll be honest, years ago, this was me, plant as soon as possible, right? So don't leave it in the 3-gallon pot for a long time. That presents a problem. But the other thing would be mulch, right?
Absolutely.
And I would encourage everybody to go back and listen to our mulching episode.
And how to mulch.
And how to mulch.
We don't want to bury that root ball, and especially the crown of those roots, with the mulch, but you want it to be up to that point. And remind me but I'm pretty sure I got this, that basically as far as the leaves or pine needles or whatever it is extend is about how much you want the mulch to extend as well.
Definitely. I think that sounds good. No volcano
No
mulching,
Right.
please. Yeah, definitely. Because what do? We typically want to have a hole that's about 2 times as wide, 1.5 to 2 times as wide as the root ball. And so those little 3-gallon pots are about a 10 to 12 inch pot, right? So we're going to want to get out another 1.5 feet or so for the whole diameter of that. And what we can do is we can put mulch around in that wider hole area that we had, but we literally want to leave the surface of that prior root ball from the pot clear of mulch.
So the whole original container.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep that clear of mulch, and then there's no because we're always going when we're watering, we're probably going to have a little mulch kind of float down and in and around
Sure.
that, and we just kind of keep that brushed away, and that reduces the likelihood that we're going to end up with mulch piled up around the stem, which is what we really don't want to happen.
Yeah, because trees have to breathe too. They don't just drink water; they also breathe.
People don't realize that. And again, we'll post a video on how to plant something properly, but not only should it be a certain width, but in terms of the depth of that hole, you don't want to be too deep, from my understanding, and cover some of the top lateral roots. You want to have some of the roots be able to breathe, because if you do that, that could be another issue.
Right. I think most of the recommendations say that we want to plant almost as much as an inch above the surrounding grade. And what that does is that kind of helps us protect. When we're digging that hole, we're not always at 100% accurate. We could have some soil settling, so that whole root ball might nestle itself right down to grade level. And so we want to make sure that we have at least an inch above grade. And that also protects those roots. So there's no likelihood that I'm going to put additional soil on top of those roots, bury the stem again, and that you have all of that surface rooting that will be able to get the moisture and oxygen from the top inch or 2 of the soil.
One of the last things about after planting that I was reading about was you may add some physical support. I don't think you're gonna need that with these trees necessarily, but I guess if you were planting something larger, you may need some kind of physical support to make sure the trees, while it's getting established, will go straight and
Like just some stakes in the ground
Yeah.
and a loose tether kind of thing.
On occasion, we get trees that are a little tall.
Does is that what happens when the county does that sometimes?
Well, when we're planting our trees, when we're planting larger stuff, say like 30-gallon material or larger, yes, we always put stakes on those trees when we initially establish them. And depending on the size, it's 2 or sometimes 3. We do a tripod on that. Most of these little guys may not need a stake. Occasionally, we get some little over-tall guys, and they might benefit from a little bit of support until they're rooted well.
Yeah, and you want it to still be able to move even with that support, because that helps the tree develop what they call the cambium layer, where that's the actual strength and integrity of that trunk, that you need it to be able to sway a little in the wind, but to have just the protection from a little too much, because our wind can be excessive at times.
Certainly, we need it to at least stay still so that it gets a chance to develop those roots. Those roots are very fine, and they can be easily torn if the tree topples from wind. And yes, so we want to develop that taper, that strong, broad base of the tree so that it's strong in the wind in the future.
Yeah. And I would say one other thing about planting sites and choosing what kind of tree and where you want to put it, look up before you plant, because I see so many trees around our community that people have planted this cute little 3-gallon pot, not paying attention to that it's only 5 feet from a power line. So now once you've got a 20-foot wide canopy, you're definitely interfering. And then I think the tree health suffers from that, because the power company essentially has no choice but to come and chop out a huge chunk of that tree, which is so unfortunate in my heart to see that. But, it's the planting place that created that problem, that they're just, until the power lines are buried or whatever else, that, there's a definite risk of interference. So watching for those kind of things, like you said, avoiding being too close to a structure, 10 feet or more, depending on the tree, and then make sure that you're looking above you as well, that all of those potential growth, the mature size of the tree, don't think today, think long term. And that just reminds me of a quote that is on a calendar that I got from the Arbor Society that it says, "He that plants trees loves others beside himself." And that's a quote from Thomas Fuller in the 17th century. And it really is an investment in the future.
It's an investment in the future. It's an investment in our community. So you're not planting just for yourself. You're planting for your neighbors. You're planting for the broader community, because that tree, even if it's in your backyard, is providing ecosystem benefits for us all. It's wildlife habitat. It's cooling in general in that area. It is providing rainfall interception and stormwater prevention. It is capturing pollutants and things along that lines.
So how do you quantify that? Is there like a dollar figure that you could put onto a mature tree to say this is the value long term that this tree is going to give you?
Yeah, there are dollar amounts that are placed on that. The iTree modeling system, again, that is available through the USDA Forest Service, calculates. They have used a number of methods, and they've created models that calculate the ecosystem benefits based on the amount of carbon, amount of pollution interception, down to the amount of PM 2.5 and PM 10, those microparticles in the atmosphere, heat, energy associated with their distance to buildings and things along those lines.
And the habitat value and everything else is part of that.
Exactly. And that even beyond those kind of numbers that we can calculate readily, but yes, then this is structure. This is structure in our urban forest that animals use, that insects use, that other microorganisms like fungus, those are really necessary. If we think about just not even the living trees, but dead trees in our ecosystems as well, right? And the importance possibly of keeping a stump in our yard for a while rather than having it ground out. If we're really lucky, we've got the space and we've got amenable neighbors to keep a snag in our yard, that's going to encourage woodpeckers. It's going to encourage maybe flying squirrels and just regular squirrels. And then all of the microorganisms and invertebrates and fungus that use those decaying trees are incredibly important as well. That us have a healthy ecosystem.
So I think what you're saying is that we want the trees dead or alive.
You got it. There's a great program I know that was started recently. It's called the Neighbor Wood Watch.
Yeah. We've talked about that in previous episodes.
You have?
Yes,
okay,
yes,
that's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, and you can actually, I don't know if they still have any, but when I first heard about it, they had little tree slices that were carved with their logo that recognized if you were protecting a snag or other sources of deadwood, even if it's a horizontal snag, that if you can lay down pieces of the logs in your landscape, maybe use them as a border or something else, that you're still providing that ecological benefit and the habitat and all these other things, that it may not be something that you're comfortable leaving it upright, or that maybe you can only leave part of it upright, that if you've got a 30-foot tree 10 feet away from your house and you can leave even just 5 feet of it standing, that it provides an amazing benefit. You can decorate that in different ways. You can maybe plant something on top of it that's trailing down or something.
Its epiphytes could be connected to it, so you have something that
Yeah, for sure.
I've seen them carved into tikis.
Right.
Nice.
And you wouldn't necessarily want to put maybe a varnish or anything on it, but just the fact of having that wood decaying in place, it gives so much benefit. And I definitely geek out on the dead trees. I just think it's amazing. The biological impact that they have in the environment is exponential compared to even when they're alive, and the number of species that it benefits. I know that I was kind of fishing for a number from you. I've seen some numbers online of the combined economic and environmental benefits of a 20 to 50 year lifespan of a tree can exceed $50,000. And that's just one estimate that I've seen, and hundreds of dollars per year in various types of benefits that it provides. So we want those trees. We need them because they are sustaining us as we sustain them. I think it's just a beautiful, amazing partnership.
I think there's so much more value too when beyond we think about those dollar values that we place on carbon and pollution and things along that lines. And then there's even research that shows that tree-lined streets increase the value of our homes, right? Mm-hmm. That make people come into business districts more. But I always think too, as well as it's got a lot to do with a sense of place. The forest that's around us is what makes our community too. When I think about Pinellas County and when I'm driving through different communities and I think about the live oaks that are all around and the pines, when I see them on the landscape, that's what this community is. It's the landscape that I know.
Yeah.
And so those trees make the sense of place. Without them being here, then it's not the same.
And I think we feel that when we travel. I know I've spent time out west and coming back and starting to see the trees. You just realize I'm home. And it is just amazing, that feeling of connection that you get.
Well, that's such a wonderful point. We travel north to visit family on a regular basis. And every time when we come back and it starts to transition to that pine canopy, it's like a sigh of relief comes over me. I absolutely love our pine dominant canopy, particularly up there in North Florida. Can I circle back around to one of the things we were just saying? I just wanted to point out something when we were talking about making sure that we have a good place for our tree. If we're participating in a tree giveaway or if we're just heading to our local nursery to pick up a new tree for our yard, is keeping an eye out on what's overhead. We're looking for those power lines, but also pay attention to the existing mature tree canopy area too. If you're planting something that's going to grow big and going to be a shade tree and needs full sun, you don't want to plant it underneath the canopy of the shade tree that's already in the corner of your yard. And then the other thing I wanted to remind people of to be very careful of is to call a locate. Call 811, have them come, make sure that there is nothing underground. You were pointing out about power lines being underground. We want to make sure that we know where our underground utilities are so that we don't run into any conflicts when we're digging a hole.
Yeah, that's a very important reminder. And you mentioned as well about the mature trees, but what if you have a tree that's declining and you want to compensate and maybe you're benefiting from the shade that it's providing and you know that it's kind of on its last legs? What would you suggest as far as the replacement ratio for a mature tree? And just pick any species, but like, would you plant a 1-to-1 or would you try to go beyond that?
Well, that's great. Of course, that's really going to be contingent on how much space you have, right? So if you have one tree and it's going to kind of really, you want to replace a nice big old laurel oak that's in the corner of your yard that's starting to age and starting to, show that and that you think that you might be taking it out in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe you want to plant a new oak tree nearby, and you just want to plant one, right? Because you know that tree is also hopefully going to mature, and its canopy may cover the entire yard, similar to what that other oak tree did. The other idea is to plant clusters of trees, right?
Okay.
So maybe if you can't just, if you wanted to be able to plant more than one for one, is that you plant trees like buddies, right? Particularly those tall columnar trees, like when we're talking about pines and bald cypress and things like that, they have better wind resistance if they're planted in clusters of 3 or more.
Okay, so like a few feet apart?
Maybe 10 feet apart.
As long as you have the space in the lot.
Yeah, if you have the space in the lot. But there's always kind of differing things, I think, among communities, even when they're talking about mitigation, like if you had to remove a tree and you needed to replace some. Often we do based on diameter of inches of the tree. So if I remove 24, that I need to replace 24. And that's obviously really challenging. I know some communities talk about replacing based on canopy for a projected period of time. If I replace an oak and I do a little 2-inch caliper oak, something that was 30 gallons, and that in 5 years' time, its canopy is estimated to be this big.
Okay.
And so maybe if I planted 3 of those, I would have an equivalent canopy to the larger tree I removed within 5 years' time. So it's a challenge. I think it's mostly, though, contingent on how much space. Pick a replacement tree that is going to be appropriate for the space that you have.
Now, something I know that's not necessarily in your area, but I think it's important that our listeners kind of understand, especially in our county, that there's a new code. There's a new code that the commissioners just passed. This is in the unincorporated areas. Again, each of your municipalities, you'll have to go to their site and find out about that. And we'll have a link on our show notes to that. But essentially, they were trying to make it simpler if you need to replace a tree. Because in the past, you really should have a permit. If you're going to replace a native species like a live oak or a laurel oak or bald cypress, any invasive species, once you identify it, you can get rid of it. And one of the things with this, and this is for homesteaded single-family lots, that it's now much simpler in terms of what you have to do. As long as the tree, and we're going to get into the DBH now, only a permit's required for trees that are greater than 24 inches diameter breast height. Now, diameter breast height is something that most people don't really realize what that is. But in the forestry world, it's 4.5 feet up, and then you measure. Now, if you're measuring with a tape measure, you then have to divide that number by pi, 3.41, whatever it is.
That's a lot of math.
That's a lot of math. I mean, you can buy a forestry tape if you want, but again, it should be 4.5 feet up, and that's what the diameter breast height is. And so that makes it much simpler for somebody who wants to replace a tree, right?
Yes.
But then if you are trying to replace the value of that tree and you have a small lot, I think that is where we come back into your scope, that they can pay into a tree replacement fund. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. And I think there's some really good information on the Pinellas County Building Development and Review website. And that's where I think you should point people for all of the details and the specifics about the changes in the ordinance. And so our urban forestry section manages those trees that are in the public space. And it's not commercial. The development review folks also help with commercial. That's private property. So we manage those trees that are in the public space. So, but it makes a great point. So there's been those recent changes to the unincorporated regions tree ordinance. And so people need to go to the website and get themselves up to date on the current requirements. But then there's also a requirement for street trees. A lot of people don't know that if they wanted to propose to remove a street tree, say they were doing something on their lot that would change the way they egress and ingress, where they go on and off of their lot, that might be where a public street tree was in the way, they would still need to reach out to the county and get a right-of-way use permit. They would be requesting that, and then we, as the urban forestry section, would go out and evaluate that tree and those circumstances and see whether or not that was a permissible activity.
So is this like if a tree was planted between the sidewalk and the road of somebody's home, that would essentially be considered public and street trees? Okay.
It is. So we manage all of that basically in the public rights of way, and that's those areas from the parcel line to the center line of the roadway. And that's where urban forestry manages trees. So we take care of those trees. And there's also some real interesting differences in responsibility for those trees. So if you have a private property tree behind the sidewalk and its canopy is extending into the roadway, Pinellas County is within their rights to prune the public side of that tree that's over the roadway and the sidewalk for public safety. Same goes for the private property owner. If there's one of those street trees that's in that tree lawn that's between the sidewalk and the roadway, and that canopy extends over the private property owner is within their rights to prune that tree if necessary. Say if it was a little too low over the driveway or something along that lines. There's no permissions needed on either side of that, but it's always good to know where the rights are and the responsibilities are for pruning those trees.
So I want to end on a fun note, and I would love to ask, what would be some of your top 3 favorite trees, and maybe some different sizes or something, just some fun facts, anything that you want to throw in for the show?
Mangroves. That's a little difficult
top
to
3 done.
Done, yes. Red, black, and white mangroves. So those are some of my favorite trees. So that's an easy one. I think like for planting in our region, of course, now we're 10A. So I think we might start to look at some of those species that we see, native species that we see growing in areas a little further south. So I was thinking like gumbo limbos might be a trend. The tourist trees, it has that really cool peely bark and it looks like a sunburned person. West Indian mahogany, which we do have some existing mahogany in around Pinellas County. I think there's some huge ones in the Kenneth City area.
I think there's some in the garden, in the botanical garden.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
So that might be, those are a couple of, maybe more southern trees that we might consider. I think bald cypress are an underutilized urban and household tree.
That's my favorite.
It's amazing. Those trees are, even though we associate them with a wetland, maybe that's because they can outcompete everybody better. But also I think some of those same strategies and evolutionary elements that allow them to live in those anaerobic conditions, help them deal with compacted urban soils.
Oh yeah, they can grow
everywhere.
everywhere.
And just that root structure is so fascinating to
Yeah.
look at.
It is. Well, fortunately, though, we don't usually have to deal with the knees when we're in a drier
Correct.
situation.
Right.
But yes, those are so amazing and beautiful.
And it's deciduous. That's my favorite part.
I like this. I don't have a problem with deciduous trees, but I really love evergreens for our homes. You know, there's real value in deciduous, right? Because we're talking about those energy benefits and the idea that if we have where we plant it, we get the shade in the summer and that we get the warming in the winter months. But it's, our winter months are pretty warm, so maybe shade's still good there. The other one I always still encourage people to do, and I know a lot of people are maybe more hesitant, are pines. Our longleaf pines and our South Florida
so
slash.
beautiful.
They are so beautiful.
Yeah.
I just love those trees. And I think if we have an opportunity, if we've got the space, please let's plant them and let's put some pines back in Pinellas.
I love that. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining us. This has been so much fun. And it's just been great learning a little bit more about the county's approach to trees, especially on public land, and just learning a little bit more about your background. And we loved having you come in, and we
Yes,
look
thank
forward
you so
to
much.
chatting with you again soon.
Thank you both. This has been great. Please invite us back. We love to talk about trees.
Awesome.
That brings us into our ending segment as always, and it is April, and it's getting warmer. I don't think we have to worry about any frost anymore or any.
Absolutely not.
I don't think so. We still have to worry about water.
Yes, that's a big one right now. And
That's a big
please,
one.
please just turn off your irrigation on the automatic cycles. Let the grass go dormant if you can. And I understand that there's some things about HOAs, but check your local municipalities because some of those actually override the HOA. And I might step on some toes for saying this, but that if you can just let your grass brown a little bit, that we're going to start getting rain soon. Our rainy season is coming, but until then, every drop really does count. And even just turn down the free water at a restaurant if you're not going to actually use it. And just anything that you can do to really help protect our natural water sources, because it's really an investment in yourself as well as in our community. Because if you're using, let's say, private well water and you think, well, it's fine. If you overuse that in a drought, you can get salt water in there and it can destroy your water source, and you have to maybe find a different well point. Or if your well runs dry and your pump is on, that it can destroy your pump. So, I mean, it can really make a big difference of where your water is coming from and just being judicious about how you're using it.
Even
and when.
reclaimed.
Absolutely.
Even reclaimed water. I think people who have reclaimed water think, I can just use it anytime I want because it's reclaimed water. No, it's still under the same restriction.
Read the updated
be careful.
guidelines and the timing. It has to be done by 4 a.m. So we always recommend watering in the early morning, and it's for the health of the plant that you want it to be just before the sun is coming up. Well, we need to back that a little bit for the health of the aquifer.
I'll make another suggestion. Some natives.
Exactly.
I have some mimosa that is
But don't plant them yet because you
No,
want to.
no.
You want to
Understood.
not have to water them in too much
I
right now.
planted them last year, and they are
Right.
doing beautiful right
Yeah.
now. And I'm sure many of the plants in your yard are just blooming, even though there's not that much water, because they're used to this drought.
Yeah, and I've planted some canna lilies and calla lilies that I have not supplemental watered them since the first 2 weeks, and they are thriving and blooming, and they're fine. So
Once you get them established.
right, and putting them in the cooler weather, they're already handling what we're at now. It's a little bit too late, I think, right now to plant something responsibly, because you would need to use some extra water just to get it established, and we don't have that water to spare. So if you can wait, and maybe there's a reason why you can't, but if you can wait, then once our rainy season really kicks in, which is just a couple of months away, that anything that you plant at that point, you don't have to supplemental water because we're getting more consistent rainfall at that point, but we also have the heat. So just knowing right place, right plant, right time, all the things.
You mean the 9 principles again?
Yeah, those.
Go back and listen to the episode.
We digress.
So what kind of things should we be? We've just talked about the irrigation. What should we be doing? Are there other things that we should be doing right now?
Well, and this is a time where things are warming up, things are
Yeah.
kind of coming back. And the stress of the heat and the lower amounts of water really is going to make your plants more susceptible to pest, because a stressed plant is really just a target for attack. So monitoring for those pests, the things like the thrips, the scale, even fungus that can happen. We saw an interesting case at the help desk recently about that oak leaf blister
Oh, yeah.
fungus. That was so weird, but it happens, and it doesn't really kill the tree, but
Yeah.
it's unsightly. And so that would be something as far as making sure that you're setting up your garden for success. If you do see those signs of damage and decay and disease on the leaves that are falling, pick up those leaves. We
Yeah,
want you
that's a
to
good
leave
point.
the leaves as mulch when you can, but if they're unhealthy, then you need to take those away. If maybe a flowering plant has had a fungus or anything of a spot disease related, that when those leaves fall off, you want to pick them up and make sure that you're keeping that area clean so that that disease doesn't then transfer back into the plant again once those dead leaves are removed.
What about there's some things that we should plant these times around? I mean, I think vegetable plants, I would think one thing. You have to think about very warm if you're planting now, they should really be.
Well, something I found that was
Go ahead.
interesting is I usually think of okra as kind of an anytime in the
Okay.
heat type of plant. But if you look at the IFAS recommendations, it's actually saying to wait until more around August. So as we're starting to cool off. And that surprised me because in the central zone, you can still plant it all summer.
Oh.
But when we consider ourselves as being more closely affiliated with South Florida in our climatology and our botanical guidelines, that we really want to use those recommendations. So when you look at the list from IFAS, which is linked in the show notes every single month, it's the plant guide calendar, we do see things like gingers and tropical spinach, even sugarcane and roselle, which is a type of hibiscus, sweet potatoes, even pineapples and papaya. Those are some things that you can plant now, different types of beans and peas as well that you can plant now. There's so many flowers that right now, I was looking
Oh
even
my
ahead
gosh.
at the next few months, and the list kind of repeats itself. So I just wanted to pick out a few. And obviously, sunflowers are an amazing one if you've got the space, or if you want maybe a shorter variety, because there's the ones that get super tall that you can collect the seeds from.
Right.
But there are some shorter ones that they call branching sunflowers, where it's more of like a little bush or shrub that it puts out multiple flowers per plant instead of just that one big one. And then you have to have another plant for another flower. So even just knowing the different varieties in there.
I do know that when I was at the gardens a couple weeks ago, I mean, everything was blooming. It was just,
Oh, yeah.
it's such a beautiful time of year. I mean, there's so much blooming now.
Absolutely.
And to keep that going would be really wonderful.
Yeah. And I had some of my marigolds come up from last year, and I thought that they'd all died off.
Oh,
But
really?
I've always been kind of conscientious about spreading the seeds back where my plants were. And sometimes they'll keep coming up throughout the year. But when it was just bare for a couple of months in the cooler weather, I thought that I'd lost them and I'd have to start over, and they're back. So I didn't put new seeds out. They were still in that soil.
That goes back to patience.
Absolutely.
Charlotte.
I
That-
know.
I think, again, people when it's November, December, and January, and you look at your plants and you go, "Oh, I'm so ugly," but they're not. They go through some dormancy. We still do, even though it's warmer than it has been, and we are in 10A and 10B. We still have plants that go through some dormancy, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But they'll come back.
And a plant that I really wanted to highlight this month, or maybe I should say a plant group, is anything in the aster family, the
Oh, yeah.
Asteraceae. And a new one to me that I just looked up this morning because I wasn't even sure how to pronounce it. I'm going to take my guess as Melampodium, and it is commonly called the butter daisy. It is a heat-tolerant, low-maintenance annual and perennial in the aster family. So the annual versus perennial, I think, depends on where you're planting it. But It has either yellow or white daisy-like flowers. It is native to the Americas. It thrives in full sun and well-drained soil, so that sounds perfect around here. And it's self-cleaning. You don't have to get out and deadhead it in the heat.
That I love.
Exactly. And having the disc flower format like a daisy that you would picture, it's very attractive to a lot of different pollinators. It's great for containers and borders. You can do big groups of it or just a few plants and then let it reseed itself and spread over time. And it's even deer resistant if you live in an area where that's an issue.
Wow.
So I thought that was a cool one. Melampodium, or the butter daisy. Well, this has been such a fun show, and
It is.
I just can't get over every time. It just seems like there's something new. And we've been moving into season 2 in our second year here, and there's so much more that we want to talk about. And each episode, we try to keep it short so that it's easy to listen to, but we always feel
This
like,
one was
oh,
a
I
difficult
forgot."
one.
I know, and we wanted to talk about so many more things,
Yeah.
but please absolutely leave us some comments about what you thought about, what stood out to you, questions that you have about our episodes, and maybe some ideas of things that you would like to hear about over the
Yes.
coming months. And we have some exciting things planned over the next couple of months, but we're always open to new ideas and suggestions. And even if you think about something that we talked about previously in an older episode, go ahead and leave the comment on this one, and we'll try to figure it out. And we see those and we read those, and it just makes us so excited when somebody interacts. And definitely come out to the Green Thumb. We're going to be there on Saturday. I'll be there in the morning, and Alan will be there in the afternoon. So we would love to meet you. So absolutely come and find one of us at the IFAS Extension booth. And that's going to be right next to the Urban Forestry booth, I think. So, yeah, we're definitely looking for some friendly faces up there.
Yeah,
and
please come by.
excited to continue the conversation, and we will see you next month.
Thanks for tuning into Planting Pinellas. We hope you're feeling inspired to get involved, learn more, and grow alongside this incredible community.
Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you like the show, leave us 5 stars or a review. And don't forget to share with fellow plant lovers. Until next time, keep planting, keep growing, and keep making Pinellas County a place to thrive.
This podcast is brought to you by the University of Florida's Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences Extension in Pinellas County, Florida, an equal opportunity institution.